desperate for hope that recovery from your eating disorder is possible? Do you feel afraid, ashamed, alone, or misunderstood? Or maybe you know someone struggling, but you don't know how to help. Friend, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Recover with God podcast, where you'll hear stories of recovery, personal and professional advice, and hope that only comes from God. You are not alone. You are understood. And God is here right now to walk this journey with you. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Recover with God podcast, hosted by me, Jamie. If this is your first time tuning in, you can listen to my story on the very first episode. But today I have Joslyn here, who is going to share her unique perspective on helping a friend who had an eating disorder. So if you're listening today and you aren't sure how to help someone you know who is struggling, this episode is for you. Hey, Joslyn, it's great to chat with you again.
Hey, Jamie, it's so nice to reconnect.
Yeah, so to y'all out there who don't know, I was on the Every Effort podcast hosted by Joslyn and her husband Matt. So this feels like a full circle moment
Yeah,
to
definitely.
now interview you. But yeah, I'll let you share more about your podcast too at the end. But first, welcome. And I am gonna start out by the first question that I love to ask every guest. Because zeal is one of my favorite words, and I love to get other people's perspectives on zeal. So, my own definition is living with a passionate pursuit of a purpose. And I'd love to hear from you, Joslyn, on what does living with zeal look like in your life right now?
Yeah, I mean, I love the word zeal. I think it's such a weird word. It's a weird spelling, and we don't use the letter Z very often.
Mhm.
But I mean, I think your definition is spot on, being passionate. And for me, that has really presented itself more recently in my life as a way of being more passionate about who I am and who God has created me to be. It's hard for me to be passionate without understanding how God created me. It's hard to direct any sort of passion without knowing the direction He has given me. So for me, zeal lately has been a lot of understanding who I am and what to go after based on how I've been created uniquely and designed to fulfill just my unique purpose.
I love that. That's a great place to start because we can choose a person for ourselves, right? But if that's not what God has for us, then it may not get us very far.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been on just a big career journey on myself, trying to figure out what I love in life and what God wants me to do in terms of volunteer work at my church. And it's a lot of little steps of saying yes to eventually get to just that bigger position that He's ultimately preparing each of us for.
That's a very great point of saying a lot of little yeses. Because I think sometimes we think it's this one massive big yes, and then, oh, we're in it, and that's it. But it does take a lot of um, faithfulness and, at each step and just, a little at a time too. So it doesn't have to feel so big either. We make those changes. So
Yeah.
great perspective on zeal. I love it. Um, and now I would also like to open it up for you to share a little bit more about who you are and the part of your story that prompted you to be on the podcast today.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Joslyn. I would say I'm your average Joss. I mean, I'm not special in any way. I grew up in sunny California and have been here my whole life. I loved math and science growing up, and so that's kind of the field I ended up pursuing in college. I studied engineering and was very involved in church pretty much my whole life. So I built a lot of really close friends in college, and that's kind of where I got to know one of my closest friends throughout college. Um, Trying to think of like a pseudonym because I'm only sharing my side of the story. I don't want to protect her privacy.
Of course, yeah.
Um, I'll call her Jan
Okay.
for short. So I met Jan actually through church. And so we both had very similar backgrounds growing up in church, but very different backgrounds in terms of family and what we experienced throughout school and friendships and even romantic relationships growing up. So it was kind of amazing how church and faith was something that united us together. And so we got to know each other really well over the years. And towards the later years of college, got to live with each other as roommates. And yeah, for the longest time, I didn't know that she was struggling with something. And so that was a big turning point for me just in learning how to be a friend to someone who is so different than me, how to learn to be compassionate, and how to do so within a community of faith as well. And so that's a big part of why I am here now talking about it is I feel I have a story to share and a lot of learnings that have come out of it. A lot of people don't realize the difficulties and also the simplicities of having a friend who struggled with an eating disorder.
Yeah, I think just from people I've talked to in my own journey, there are so many people who don't know how to help, or like you said, for a long time, you not even realize there's a problem. And then you realize, okay, there is a problem, but should I, what is the next step here? And just knowing that someone you really care for is suffering, that I can imagine that that's hard. I was on the other side of that, but I know the people in my life really cared for me. So thank you for, first of all, for sharing this story. I appreciate you wanting to keep that friend anonymous in this sense. And what sort of emotions did you feel during that time when you learned of your friend's eating disorder, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so it kind of progressed itself into my knowledge. It wasn't like a single point where she told me or a mutual friend told me. I think there were just kind of bits and pieces. I definitely noticed that, when we ate together as a group of friends, she wouldn't eat very much. Or whenever we had, sharing times during Bible study with a group of girls, she would mention, struggling with the way that feeling she didn't look very, very well. She didn't like the way that she looked. There were just things about herself that brought down her self-esteem. And so over time, kind of piecing everything together, it made itself known. So when I was able to have a conversation with her, just getting to know her, she opened up and shared about it, and it just kind of it made sense. Like I think all of the little pieces that seemed a little bit different in the way that she would act or the way that she would word things about herself. Um, I wasn't looking for an answer or a way of understanding. It just became a complete puzzle in my mind at that point. And I think she had this impression that a lot of her friends just already knew these things about her and that she felt like she had to hide. But they were really just small observations. And I really think it was up to her to share with each person individually what she was going through in order for us to step forward and not only our friendship, but just in supporting her.
That was really brave of her, number one, to share with you. And I know that's a huge challenge when you're struggling. And then also, obviously, it sounds like you had set yourself up to be that type of friend where she felt comfortable, where she could share with you. So that's also amazing that you had that relationship with her where she knew. I would think, I mean, I don't know her, so I can't assume, but like not feeling judged is really big. I know, at least for someone struggling. So you must have been that source of friendship where she felt she maybe wouldn't feel judged by telling you. So that's amazing. Um, that you even had that experience of her telling you instead of maybe you just figuring it out on your own. Um, how did your relationship with God impact the conversations that you had with her once you realized, or once she told you that she had a struggle?
Yeah, honestly, like I don't know how um I don't know how she herself could go through what she has and is going through without having a relationship with God. And I'm so thankful that we were both part of the same church and faith to be able to just help bridge whatever gaps she had, um, either, negatively in the way she viewed herself, like we could speak life into that. that wasn't always the solution, though. I will say, like, it wasn't always about connecting things to faith. Of course, everything we do is a reflection of how we view God and how we practice our faith. But it's not always about trying to insert some verse somewhere. But just being able to share that made it so much easier getting to know her and her struggles, and being in environments that were safe to talk about it. So prayer is just something that we couldn't avoid. Like, it was just a necessity to always and constantly be praying for her as her friend, and to be praying with her as well. And to also know that, it's not our problem to solve. It's not our spiritual battle. She's just been gifted to us as a friend to support, and we can support her in our own ways as well, but we don't need to insert ourselves to be the ones to quote unquote save her in whatever sense, because God had his own plan and has his own plan in her life that it's just not our responsibility.
Thank you for sharing that. That's to not have that burden. I think that's important to know, and knowing that you're right. At the end of the day, this is the only person who can change is the person struggling with an eating disorder. That is their choice to recover or not. And you can be a support, and you can, be as much, you can do as much as possible, and it's still, there's still, at the end of the day, it's not up to you. So I hope if anyone's listening right now and you feel that burden, that you will feel it. You can also release that to God, because it's not yours to carry. And all you need to do is just, show up. And I also appreciate you saying that it's not always about God, because I do think that, especially in Christian culture, there is that pressure to, like you said, share that verse, or say, well, if you just pray enough, then it's gonna go away, or something like that. But to say, like, praying is definitely important. That doesn't mean that's going to be the only answer. But I mean, the Bible tells us to pray without ceasing, and just keep taking it to God. And so thank you for that perspective, because I think that's a really healthy way of looking at it from the angle of wanting to help a friend or family member too.
Yeah, the times I saw her at her best was when she was just having fun with
Mhm.
friends. It wasn't when we were like in a circle talking about, our struggles and our desires and passions for life. Like, I think I don't think there was anything special about me, to be honest, that made her open up. I think I just saw her as a friend and just wanted to have, fun with her and just do everyday life with her. And it just naturally happened that way, that she was able to open up. And I learned that she was actually one of the most joyful people that I had ever gotten to know. And I think that um, it made sense to me that such a darkness would overcome a person like her, because there was so much more to her, that essentially the enemy had so much more to lose if she weren't restrained. And so I've just seen her open up and just have more joy and happiness in her life, by being more open, by having more fun, like just those simple things in life. Like it wasn't always about trying to make her feel better or her see things differently. I think treating her as just like a normal friend was the best medicine that I saw work in her life.
Wow. Okay, that's a powerful statement, number one, about thinking the enemy will attack the people that have the most joy, or not even the most joy, but just joy in the sense of wanting to stifle that, so you're not as effective for God and for the kingdom. That's I never really thought about it like that, but that makes a lot of sense. And also from the perspective of someone who had an eating disorder, I will say, yes, being treated just normally, I think, does go a long way um in someone realizing, like, this is the life I could have. This is like a normal, happy life is what I could have if I let go of this eating disorder. And otherwise, you're not living in that freedom. You're living in bondage. And so, showing her, being a friend, showing her what that looked like, I could definitely understand how that would help. And again, and not even putting pressure on her, because sometimes think as someone who is struggling, you can feel a lot of pressure when someone's trying to help you, like, oh, if I need to do it for them, then that's not the reason to recover is for other people. You still have to do it for yourself. So,
Yeah.
again, yeah, great insight. Um, was there anything that surprised you about eating disorders that you didn't know before or that you just didn't really expect when you after you spent time with her?
Yeah. Um, so full disclosure, she had struggled with anorexia when she was in high school. I had gotten to know her throughout college, which is when she struggled with bulimia. So my understanding of bulimia at the time was that it was a way more consistent thing. Like I assumed it like there was an event that occurred like at least every week. But getting to know my friend Jan, I learned that it could span between months of time and still be considered like a long time struggle for somebody. And so there would kind of be relapses in a sense for her where yeah, she would, she'd keep it hidden and eventually she would tell someone about what happened. And um yeah, it would break our hearts to hear it, but I was surprised to see that because I thought things were going so well, and it's like you don't really know what's going on in someone's mind and someone's heart, and it's not that easy to pass like to go through a school and consider it one and done. Like it really is a long time battle, and um, even learning that, her bulimia had evolved from anorexia, that was something I didn't really understand could happen at the time, that, different habits could be adopted within eating disorders. I had assumed that usually someone struggles with one or the other throughout their life.
That's another good point to bring up. That her story sounds similar to mine. I restricted very heavily in high school, and that eventually led to my binging. And because and that goes back to science, really. When you restrict so much, your body just naturally wants you to eat. And yeah, and I've heard since my own recovery, I've heard of other women kind of going through similar things where the restriction starts first and then that leads to binges and then that can lead to bulimia if you want to purge that food. And but I'm with you though. I mean, before I had my own eating disorder and I knew of anorexia and bulimia, I never would have thought that one could potentially kind of morph into another. And it's yeah, there are no kind of black and whites in a lot of sense. Disordered eating and eating disorders can look a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
So that's yeah. There's a lot more we could say about that too. But yeah, in terms of um what you or maybe something that you even told Jan when you were talking to her, but is there anything that you would suggest or recommend that someone say to a friend who's struggling with an eating disorder right now, um, that or not say?
Yeah. I mean, I do want to say like I'm no expert, and I do believe like every person and situation can be different. And I'm no expert on what works and what doesn't work. But I think what I noticed and like what I had mentioned earlier, like for one, treating someone like a friend, like a regular friend, um, it's okay to know that someone is struggling with something very deeply and to not address it every time that you spend time with them. I don't think that that helps a person. I think they're well aware of what they're going through. If you could just build trust with them that you're a person that is just there and not necessarily having an agenda to fix them. Um, Also being aware of just how much that someone carries emotionally when they're struggling with something physically like that. I definitely made my mistakes. I was not a perfect friend. I had a period of time where I overburdened Jan with information about my struggles at the time, and I saw that really tear into our friendship at that point. And I should have I should have known and been more aware of just the burdens that she was carrying for her own life and just thought more wisely of, okay, who should I share what I'm struggling with as well, besides, one really close friend. So having that awareness of how much negative energy you could pour into a person, I think is really important. But also positive energy as well of, like I said, just having fun with them, building that trust over time. I think those really helped with our relationship.
That's an interesting point too, with bringing, sharing information you thought may be helpful to her, and you found out that it wasn't necessarily. So I think that's a good point to bring up in terms of, I think probably we've all been there, with a friend we want to help with anything they're going through. We're like, oh, and you
Right.
you have the best intentions, right? Like, oh, I found this article, or I read this statistic or something, and you think that might help. And the word overwhelming is really a good word to use, because it can definitely just maybe not what is needed in the moment. So
Yeah, I think you have to like really know your friend because some people are going to be blunt and say, "Hey, no thanks," and you're like, "Okay,
mhm.
fine." And other people are just going to be really nice and just listen, but inside they're just feeling and thinking like, "I really don't want this right now?"
Yeah, that's deep too, because you're right. There are people who they'll be nice on the outside, and on the inside, it's like they may slowly back away from you because they don't want to keep talking about it, or um, they just want you to be there, but not giving them things. So
Yeah.
that's a really good point. Um, was there anything that you, besides just being her friend, and just knowing that she could go to you, that you thought helped as well during the process? If not, that's okay.
Um, Yeah, I mean, besides like prayer, praying for her with her, and also when I wasn't with her, whenever she came to mind, just talking to God about it. Um, I only wanted the best for her, and I still only want the best for her. And I truly believe that there is redemption on the other side, and just filling her with hope. I remember there was a lot of times that she and I had like very deep conversations about it, and um she loved just being filled with the hope of God and just the hope of redemption, and just kind of like, I don't really know like literally how things will shake out 10, 15, 20 years from now, but I know that God is very good, and I know that he loves her, and that she had such a kind and like joyful spirit that I know like God wanted to use. Like in so many ways I thought she was just a way more compassionate and nice person compared to me. Like I'm very blunt and not as nice around the edges, I would say sometimes. So I definitely saw like, wow, God's gonna do so much through her in her life. And like I'm so excited to see that happen for her. And so like if you're going to be friends with someone struggling through like an eating disorder, like you have to believe in them. You have to believe in that as well, because they need to know that they're around people that aren't just superficially supporting them, but really seeing like an amazing end to their story.
Wow. That's beautiful. Just the way you said that, especially at the end, showing them what it could be, right? And just, yeah, the encouragement. I personally love the idea of spreading hope, which is
Yeah.
the my hope and the girl is my Instagram handle. So I really resonate with that, and I think anytime, anywhere, any place, with any struggle, if you can share hope with someone, that is huge. And that's what God calls us all to do, is just be that hope for other people. And, especially when they don't have it themselves, like pouring into them hope. And yeah, and then the prayer too. I love that you mentioned that you prayed with her too. And of course, I think that probably depends on the relationship. And like you said previously, that may not, you don't want to do that necessarily all the time, being focused on that, but having those moments where it feels right, to do it, and your friend or your family members also willing. I think that's really special, um, to have that prayer partner with you. But yeah, hope. hope and encouragement, those things go a long way. And I think just to anyone listening too, you don't have to have gone through the same struggle to share hope with someone. Just like Jocelyn said, just pouring into them of like what what they're really good at and what they could excel at, what they bring to the world that no one else brings. I think I love that. I love that you could do that, be that hope for your friend, Jan. Um, so another question, and this is kind of on the flip side, to the person struggling now who might be listening, and they might have friends or family that they are considering sharing this struggle with, but they're really afraid or they don't know how to share. I'm not sure how their family or friends would react to this. What advice would you give that person?
Yeah. Well, for one, like totally understand why you wouldn't trust people. I mean, over the years of experiencing people more and more, like I've personally become more careful about who I choose to trust with my emotions. So first off, you're not crazy for not sharing with every person you see about what you're going through. Um, I think um, following your gut and asking yourself, like, do I trust this person? Is it a yes or a no? And if it's a yes, consider and pray and give it an opportunity to open up and share. And you don't have to share your full story at once, but if it's just in small bits and pieces, you'll soon find the people who are going to be drawn to you and who want to be there for you and get to know you more. Um, it's kind of like going fishing. You throw a couple of lines of bait and kind of see who catches on and reel those people in, but don't expect them to do all the work. You still got to reel that line back in yourself. So um, don't put the pressure on other people to, know everything about you. But give yourself, the permission to be vulnerable too. Because ultimately, like, you're not gonna, with anything you're going through in life, you're not going to get through it until you share it with someone, and someone who you can trust and who will support you. And if you're listening and are a person of faith, like I think church is a great place to start and do that. Find a church that you believe in and can be grounded in. I found the best people to really walk through life through some of the darkest times of my life to be in church. So that'd be my greatest advice.
Mm. That reminds me of my story too. So a few of the first people I ever told about my recovery it was in my church small group. And it was scary for sure, but it was also really powerful. And I felt like I was in a safe space because I had gotten to know them um, for multiple weeks in the group, and it just felt like the time to, like you said, put the lines out, kind of test the waters, and see how they responded and where it would go from there. And I love a good analogy. That was great. So thinking about it like fishing, and then the fact that, yeah, I mean, it was still my responsibility after I shared to not then just put that whole story or that burden on them, like, oh, they know my story now, they have to a certain way, or they have to um, you know do certain things that make me more comfortable, things like that. It was just, yeah, I've now entrusted them with that story. So and yes, church is definitely a great place to start if there's anyone out there who's a little intimidated by sharing wherever you're at. You don't even have to be recovered. I didn't tell these people until I recovered, but you can tell a friend at any time. And don't be afraid to think, oh, I have to be recovered before I can share this with anyone, because that's not true either. And the more people you have in your corner and have supporting you, the more you will see that future, what it could be. And you can still live life even during recovery, or even as you're making those steps, those little yeses. Goes back to zeal. It's a little yeses even in recovery, and one of the yeses could be telling a friend or
Yeah.
your family. So, no, that's great advice. Um, are there any final thoughts you have on this topic that you'd like to share that maybe we didn't cover?
Um, I don't think so. No, I think we hit a lot of the main things I
Yeah,
was hoping to share.
we really did. I think, again, I just want to thank you for being that friend to Jan and just and even though you might think it was nothing special, I guarantee you it was special to her. Because I know that would have been special to me. So I think having that space, that safe space, and just wanting to, I mean, it sounds like you probably listened a lot to her too. Just like letting her share what she's comfortable sharing. I think that goes such a long way. So really appreciate that you were that friend to her. Um, and now I would like to give you a chance to talk about your podcast a little bit more. I know we met at the beginning, and you even had a really great episode that kind of ties along with this topic on with someone who had been through eating disorder recovery and is now and is a nutritionist. And so I thought that episode specifically really spoke to me on the topic of this podcast. But anyway, I want to give you a chance to share more about your podcast, how people can listen, and even your mission behind it. Like what is your goal with your podcast?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. I mean, thank you
Mhm.
for having me on with your podcast.
Of course.
For those listening, like Jamie is such a genuine speaker and advocator for others, and I just love how truly genuine you are, Jamie. So,
Thank you.
thank you for just putting up to the world like who you are and not who other people want to look up to. I truly pray that, your podcast continues to attract the people who need it. And yeah, so like Jamie mentioned, my name is Joslyn. I co-host the Every Effort podcast with my husband, Matt. It has been quite the journey and evolution of different topics, and we really have a passion for young adults and just setting one single spot for them to come and ask questions about their career, their health, their faith. Um, People who are just very intellectually curious about different topics in their life, but want there to be a faith backing to it, and want to live life with Jesus in every area. The Every Effort podcast is a great place to do it. So feel free to check us out on Instagram at Every Effort Podcast. That's the quickest way to get plugged into all of the resources that we have.
Yes, y'all, you need to listen to it. As Jocelyn said, you hit a lot of unique topics I've not heard other podcasts or other people really talk about in some cases. And even the guests that you bring on are, they really hit on some unique topics. And you get deep. I mean, I love that about your podcast. It's not surface level. You ask hard questions. You even in some cases analyze them on the spot, without having sometimes without having much thought at all. It's just like, well, okay, what is our kind of gut reaction to this? But then also you come at certain topics with a lot of research and information and just that curiosity, which I think curiosity is so undervalued in our culture
Yeah.
of just like wanting to know. And we live in this culture where you can Google anything, right? And you get an answer from Google. And then a lot of times it's so easy to take that as face value and not dig any deeper into, well, what does that mean? Is this true? How does this apply to my life? And that's what Every Effort podcast does. You get so deep and it's not just some surface level Google answer. So, everyone, if you haven't listened yet, I really encourage you to give it a listen and follow them as well on Instagram. You will not regret it. So, um, is there anything else you are maybe working on or anything you'd want to promote coming up on the podcast? That would be kind of early 2024.
Um, if you're listening and you're someone who has a story to share, or are an expert in some field and can add your Christian perspective to it, check out our Instagram page, and we have a post up at the top where you can sign up. And we could consider you to come on the show and talk more. So that would be a cool opportunity for those interested.
That's awesome. Yes, I would love to hear some more yeah, experts in certain fields or just people who have a really interesting story. So I will post all that in the show notes, all the links, all the spots where you can connect with Joslyn and Matt and their podcast, and would love to have everyone listening to that. So thank you again, Joslyn. This conversation's been great. I so appreciate your perspective on wanting to help a friend or family member. That was really another side of the heart behind this podcast, not just interviewing people who have experienced eating disorder recovery, but people who want to come alongside because there is such a need for that as well. I know in my own journey, like I said, I've had people come to me who just said, how do I help my daughter? How do I help my friend? And so thank you for being a person here today who can give them some insight that they are desperately in need for.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Jamie. And I'm looking forward to digging up our episode together from Every Effort as well and kind of promoting that again. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing all the people that this is going to reach out to.
Yes, it will. And I will definitely be sharing our podcast episode as well so that I'll put that in the show notes too. So people can listen to the conversation I had on Every Effort podcast with Matt and Joslyn several months ago. So, all right, thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning into today's episode.
Hey friend, I hope this conversation encouraged you today. And if it did, please let me know by rating and reviewing the Recover with God podcast wherever you are listening. Your feedback helps others find this podcast too. And click that follow button so you don't miss new episodes airing every Wednesday this season. Be sure to check out the show notes for all the links and additional resources we talked about today. And don't forget, whether you need help or you want to help, all help comes from God.